One of my main platforms has actually been trying to dissuade people from getting rabbits. I get people coming to me all the time saying, I really want a rabbit, but these are my obstacles, X, Y, and Z. And sometimes I have to say, I don't think you're qualified. There is a misconception that they are low maintenance because they're small. They think it's going to be easy. They don't realize, you've got to potty train, you've got to do all these things, which is really sad because a lot of those rabbits wind up dead. I think my top one is not for small children. That's a really big one. Your 3-year-old is not going to clean out your rabbit's litter box and patch up the baseboards when they've chewed the baseboards. And your 3-year-old is not going to pay for the vet bills.
Rabbits are still one of the most misunderstood pets people bring into their homes. They're often bought for children, they're kept in hutches, seen as low maintenance, yet rabbits are emotionally complex, physically fragile animals that can express stress, loneliness, fear, and illness in ways many owners never fully recognized until it's too late. And over the last few years, few people have changed the way the internet sees rabbits quite like today's guest. Today I'm joined by Lorelei Carlson, whose life with her rabbits, especially Lennon, has resonated with millions of people online and helped many owners see rabbits very differently. And in this conversation, we're going to talk about rabbit behavior, health, emotional bonds, common myths, social media, grief, and the realities of caring for animals that are often so underestimated. I've been looking forward to this conversation because I think you've helped so many people completely rethink the way that they see rabbits and rabbit ownership. And before we get into rabbit care and behavior, I'd love to start obviously getting to know you a bit better. How did they first become such a huge part of your life?
Oh my gosh. It was an accident. I got my rabbit Lennon sort of impulsively. It was an impulsive purchase. I was kind of going through a depression and I wanted a pet, but I was limited with what I could get because I lived in a really small apartment. My landlord didn't allow cats or dogs. And then for some reason I thought, well, maybe I can kind of skirt around that and get a bunny? I don't know. I thought like I could get away with it somehow. And it wasn't super premeditated, but I did have sort of a vision of like wanting a companion and just kind of like figuring out what that would look like, right? And then I kind of stumbled across Lennon at a pet store. She wasn't like being kept in the greatest conditions. She was like kind of stuffed into a cage with like 10 other baby bunnies. And I got her that night. The pet store owner, kind of helped me pick her. And also at the time, like told me that she was a boy. So there was a lot of misinformation involved in acquiring her, right? Like he kind of gave me misinformation about her diet, how big she would grow to be, her sex and everything. And so, when I brought her home and actually did the work of immersing myself into learning rabbit care and discovering that she was in fact a girl, and kind of that journey was really what sparked, I would say, it sparked something in me to want to help others so that they wouldn't go through that difficult navigation that I went through. I wanted to make it easy for people, like in a very palatable way, because what I had found was that the information about rabbits on the internet was very bleak and outdated. And I kind of, I'm an artist. I have a background in music and film, and I picked up my camera and I kind of started documenting our life together. And that's kind of what kicked off the YouTube channel and the content creation. And I really was like learning a lot of it as I would go along. A lot of it is self-taught, but I kind of also learned a lot through working with animal shelters and rabbit rescues and just really like, yeah, immersing myself in that world and then wanting to like regurgitate that information for people in a very easy, palatable way. So that's kind of, yeah, that's what started it all.
Oh, that's lovely. And for people who know Lennon, or no, obviously Lennon has passed, sadly, condolences, but through social media, what was she actually like in real life?
There really wasn't a big difference between her on or off camera, to be honest. She was always her authentic self. She's very sweet, trusting rabbit. I mean, she would trust a murderer. She just but that was like that's what I instilled in her was trust in humans, and that's what I wanted for every rabbit. She was very outgoing. A lot of rabbits have very similar personalities because they are prey animals, but because of the way Lennon was raised, she just was not scared of really anything. She wasn't scared of helicopters or dogs she was very, very bold, very confident, because she knew that I was like, that I had her back, that I was always protecting her. And as long as I was around her, I think she felt like she could rule the world. So, and I think that showed on camera too. She had just very bubbly, aura about her.
No, it's beautiful content, and it was, it's lovely to look and see how it's resonates. But I mean, I think what's really interesting is that so many people discovered rabbits through your content and suddenly started seeing them in a completely different light. Did you ever expect that this to resonate with people the way it did online?
To a degree, yeah, yes. Mainly because I know how I resonate with others online. And I know what I look for in content that I want to watch and connect with. And I knew that I could deliver that to people very early on, because I always felt very confident with my content creation. Because, yeah, it's not just, of course, like the relationship that Lennon and I had was really the highlight of it all. So I knew that if it did reach the right people, that it could catch fire. But that part you just never know if it will. Yeah.
No, it's beautifully produced and it's beautiful content. It's admirable, I must say.
Thank you.
So why do you think, pleasure, why do you think people become so emotionally attached to rabbits once they truly get to know them?
Well, I think that we have the ability to attach to any animal, really. And so I think it's a universal thing. I don't think it's specific to rabbits. People love their dogs. People love their cats. But I think specifically when it comes to rabbits, there is definitely, I would say, like a reward system involved because they are prey animals. So it is a little bit harder to break down their wall at first. And once you do break it down, I think that it can be a little bit addicting because it's like positive reinforcement for you as the owner. You go, oh, I must be doing something right if they're kissing me. I must be doing something right if they're coming up to me and searching for me. Because it's not typically something that a rabbit would do with just anybody, And so I think that once people are really able to hone in and connect with their rabbit, it changes the dynamic for sure, and people really come to love their rabbits. There's a really big crazy bunny community. So, but I'm happy to see it.
No, me too.
You look at me, I look at you, I see the love in your eyes. I'm lost in
Health you can see, love you can feel. Ultra Pet, the science of love.
Obviously, in my experience as a veterinarian, I have seen a bit like you expressed your impulse buy. I've seen people becoming or misinterpreting the responsibility in terms of thinking that these are easy pets in comparison to dogs and cats, and thinking, well, live in an apartment or live in a property, and I can keep them because they're easy pets. And actually, we know in reality they popped in a hutch and left to their own devices, and they're very neglected emotionally and nutritionally. And then obviously in terms of some of the disease states we see them in, it can be quite devastating. How do you approach that in terms of the information that you put out there in terms of warning people about the responsibility around taking on rabbits?
One of my main platforms has actually been trying to dissuade people from getting rabbits. I get people coming to me all the time saying, I really want a rabbit, but, these are my obstacles, X, Y, and Z. And sometimes I have to say, I don't think you're qualified, but obviously it's an opinion, but I think that people often sort of, I think, gravitate to rabbits because there is a misconception that they are low maintenance because they're small. They're smaller than a dog or a cat. Actually, some rabbits are bigger than some dogs, to be honest with you, but it's not really widely talked about. But not to digress, I think that there's just a lot of misconceptions about rabbits. And so people do get them impulsively. They bring them home. They don't know what they're doing. Sometimes they might, buy them at a fair, or they were gifted one for Easter, or it's like, a mother thinks her 3-year-old would appreciate it, and the list goes on. Or maybe they have they live with a very large predatory dog. There's so many reasons why I would say don't bring one to your home if that's the case. But that's part of my platform, is trying to educate and trying to actually describe what those consequences could be. A lot of those rabbits wind up dead. They wind up dead. They don't get the care they need. People realize they can't afford exotic care. And they think it's going to be easy. They don't realize, you've got to potty train. You've got to do all these things, which is really sad because a lot of people, I know it happens with other animals. People do they'll buy a dog impulsively too. But I think there's almost like this common knowledge that it's going to be work if you get a dog. You've got to go walk them and all that stuff and potty train the dog. But for some reason, people don't think, I've got to potty train a rabbit too. And so, part of my job has always entailed dissuading people. And then also, if they do wind up with a rabbit that they're not supposed to have, trying to help them keep the rabbit by improving all the things that they were maybe lacking in.
So in terms of candidates for the bunny community, so when you have someone approach you, what are the kind of red flag comments that make you go, this is not a conducive, this is not a good environment for a rabbit? Take us through some of the things that make you say, we've been discussing, but your top red flags for those who are not going to be okay longer term.
I think my top one is not for small children. Yeah. That's a really big one. So your 3-year-old is not going to clean out your rabbit's litter box and patch up the baseboards when they've chewed the baseboards, and brush your rabbit when they're going through a really big molt. And your 3-year-old is not going to pay for the vet bills. So that's my biggest one. And I think it's like one of the biggest ones that I think in the rabbit community we've all kind of been fighting against is getting rabbits for small children. I think the second red flag is trying to make a rabbit cohabitate with predatory animals. I know on the internet, there's a lot of cute videos of like rabbits playing with dogs or whatever. And, I always question those. I don't really love it. I know that there's always the exception to the rule. There's always going to be like maybe a dog and a rabbit that were like raised together since birth and that sort of thing. But like that's not the rule. That's the exception. And I think that if you live with a predatory animal already, I wouldn't bother. It's too risky. I mean, again, unless like maybe like your cat is like 20 years old and blind and deaf and like, on their way out and like, yeah, okay, sure. Like they probably don't care to, kill your bunny. But again, that's the exception, not the rule. And then another red flag I would say is, I think affordability. I think people underestimate the cost of owning a rabbit. I think, the basics are not super expensive. It's not going to break the bank for you to buy a litter box or a food bowl or, maybe some hay. But I think the long-term costs really add up. And I think people underestimate that. And the vet costs especially add up a lot. And you have fewer options with vets too. So you're always forced to drive really far away or maybe go to someone who's because there's so few vets that treat rabbits, they know they can charge a little more, because they're the only ones in the area. So there's a little bit of a premium perhaps, or, maybe they're like the best in the area. And whereas with dogs and cats, it's like you probably have like 50 vets to choose from. And so you can compare pricing and, shop for what fits your budget. And I don't think people with rabbits are allotted that luxury, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And so I would say those are like the top 3 is make sure for sure you can afford it, that you have a steady income, that you're stable. You may not have vet visits in the beginning of the rabbit's life so much because they're young and healthy. And those first few years, they're not going to have a ton of issues, but there's so much that could happen. They could get into an accident. They could eat the wrong thing. And then that latter half of their life where they start to develop age-related issues is where it really, in my opinion, breaks the bank. So,
yeah. No, great advice. And I totally agree with you. Those are definitely key things. We advise in the same manner that, if people are wanting something for a young child, rabbits are definitely a lot more complicated than people anticipate. And then there's the discussion, and I suppose I'd like your opinion on it. When the discussion of rabbit ownership comes up, it's where are you going to keep them? So from my understanding, there is obviously the combination, but people generally decide that they're going to keep them, and depending on where they're located, in a hutch as outdoor animals, and there are issues involved with that, or as indoor pets with litter trays and the complexities and the dangers and risks within a home. Can you discuss sort of your feelings on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the rabbit community is very split on this issue, but I've noticed that it's very contingent on region. What part of the world you live in. And I know in like the UK, it's a little more common to keep them in hutches outside. In the US, I feel like we have really strayed from that notion a little bit more. It's more widely accepted here to keep them indoors, mainly because rabbits, I mean, I know they're still viewed as livestock in many parts of the world, but less so in the US. You know, it's rare that you'll see rabbit on a food menu over here. And so I think that the farming of rabbits has diminished a lot in the US. It still exists, but it's diminished a lot. The demand is not huge here. And so I've noticed maybe in other countries where there still is a demand, it's still more acceptable for them to live outside. And so I've always been of the belief that a rabbit lives its longest, healthiest life indoors. And you don't need to live in a mansion or a huge house, you know, to give them the life that they should have. I think that's another misconception. People go, oh, well, you know, I live in a small apartment and I don't have several rooms. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. You know, a rabbit is like 3 to 4 pounds. Like they're going to be content with just hanging out in the living room if you gave them the living room. I've always been an advocate for free roaming a rabbit, just letting them run loose in the home as long as you've bunny proofed the home, because in that sense, they're no different than a dog or a cat. They want to run, they want to jump, they want to hide under the couch, you know, and they want to exercise. They want to, exude their natural rabbit behaviors without any impediments. And I find that those cages kill them. They shorten their lifespan. They don't get the activity and the exercise that they need. They become depressed. They're unable to connect with their owners on a deeper level if they're just living in a cage. You know, so the list goes on. And then in terms of like hutches outside, I mean, that's also a different battle on its own. I think once rabbits can stop being viewed as livestock, that will change, because I've always just thought it was strange if you're going to get a pet, but like if you're not going to interact with them or live with them, what was the point?
I mean, obviously, them being outside also exposes them to, like you say, risks of predators, parasites. You know, some of the most horrific cases I've seen in my veterinary career have been the rabbits with fly strike. I mean, I know that can, in theory, happen inside, but obviously outside with warmer climates, and it's horrendous. And I mean, you can actually smell that condition before you see it. You just get like a particular smell from that carrier. It's dreadful, and it's just such awful suffering. So definitely having them in a home where you can engage with them, you can monitor them, and like you say, you can bond with them. I mean, this obviously is really interesting, because I think, you know, we spoke right at the start about them being seen as easy pets, but there is a lot more to them emotionally. Tell me about the kind of connection that you can have with your rabbit if you take the time and care. Tell me about the kind of interaction that you have experienced yourself.
Just quickly to sort of bounce off your point is, yes, so many diseases outdoors that can be caught as well, deadly ones, especially in the Americas right now. We're dealing with RHDV2, and that's killed a lot of our rabbit population.
Awful.
There's like myxomatosis, there's like you said, fly strike. They can get all sorts of things. Eat poisonous plants as well. So yes, the risks for outdoors are totally, the cons outweigh the pros. If I don't even know if there are any pros, but yes. And then in terms of connecting with a rabbit, right? Yeah, I mean, rabbits are incredibly smart, and I think that's not often talked about or depicted very often in media. I think that again, this goes back to the stereotype of just rabbits sort of belonging in cages and being lumped in with other smaller animals who have smaller brains, and those animals are smart in their own ways too, but I mean, if you look at what rabbits can do, like they can do tricks. They can respond to commands. They're very, very sassy. I always like to say they're sort of a hybrid between a dog and a cat because they love you like a dog, but they have the sassiness of a cat. And so, they'll beg for a treat like a dog would. And then once they've had enough of you, they're like, oh, I need my space. Excuse me. Enough kisses, It's very, very cute the way that they act. But they love so hard. They have such big hearts. For example, they won't just kiss anybody. That's a very, very specific act for rabbits that is solely relegated to their partner, whether their partner's a rabbit or another human, because rabbits operate on a hierarchical system. And so there tends to be a dominant or a submissive in the relationship. And so they're very, very peculiar about who they are submissive to, right? And submission often means kissing because it's an act of grooming. And so the submissive rabbit will groom the dominant rabbit. The dominant rabbit is like the one that kind of, they get to be protected, they get to be cleaned, all that stuff by the other rabbit. And so if you find that your rabbit is kissing you, they're being submissive, and that kind of takes a lot for them sometimes because a lot of rabbits want to be in that dominant position. So I think, yeah, they love very, very hard, and they miss you, and they wait for you to come home from work. And, if you've ever watched your rabbit from a Ring camera, like a little security camera, you'll find that they're just kind of waiting for you. They're waiting for you to come home from work or school. And, or if you've ever gone on vacation and, picked them up from their bunny sitter, you'll notice that they get happy when you come to pick them up. So yeah, there's so many deep levels and ways to connect with a rabbit.
So I know that owners of dogs and cats struggle, we speak about it a lot, to read the subtle signs in particular of discomfort, pain, joy, fear in animals that we are spending a lot more time with. How do you explain what behaviors are normal for rabbits, which are ones that owners should be concerned about, and which ones are indicating things like illness or discomfort?
Yeah, I think the biggest indicator is they stop eating, but not just everything. Typically, sometimes rabbits will be sick, but they'll still nibble on a thing here or there. But I think once they stop taking their favorite treat, that's a really big red flag. If a rabbit does not, rabbits go absolutely wild for their favorite treats. Banana, strawberry, whatever, a little cookie that they like. And if you don't get that reaction from them and they're kind of retreating, they're just in a corner and they're kind of hunched over, that's really bad news. But typically you don't want to let it get that far. Although sometimes you catch them and it is really, really late, maybe because you were at work or whatever. Or, the thing with rabbits is because they're prey animals as well, they tend to kind of hide their pain and hide their illness. But yeah, I would say the biggest red flag is just no appetite, not taking their favorite treat. And then from there, you can kind of do more diagnostics, listen to their belly. Is it grumbling? Is it working? That sort of thing. And then as far as like you're a vet, there's so many illnesses that could happen. It's not just digestive, but for rabbits, like one of the biggest killers is GI stasis, which is a digestive blockage, or it's when the digestive system slows down. And people often catch that one too late because it's a very silent killer, But there's so many symptoms that pertain to other illnesses. I just think if you notice anything, any discharge, any odors, maybe they're scratching more often, any little thing that's like off, then I would say go to the vet.
Which I suppose just reinforces your feeling about keeping them in the home so that you can look at them and you can interact with them frequently rather than them being left in a hutch or in a cage. Sort of situation where, unfortunately, the interaction is reduced. So in terms of, tell us some of the quirky behaviors that they show. How do you know when they are not wanting to interact or they're angry about something? What are the sort of typical, for people who are not familiar with rabbits, what does an angry rabbit look like, for example?
An angry rabbit, it's actually very funny because they're so small and sweet that when they're angry, you can't even it's like a sweet anger too. Like they just there are mean rabbits out there, don't get me wrong, but it's still very cute. Like they're not gonna I wouldn't say they're scary, right? Like maybe an angry dog, that's probably scary. But I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that they're relatively silent animals. So they don't bark and things like that. But an angry rabbit can exhibit themselves through thumping. So they'll thump their back legs. Sometimes that's more of like an I'm annoyed action rather than anger. It can be a sign of protest. It can also be they are sensing danger nearby, and so they're kind of warning their colony. This is just sort of ancestral behavior. But yeah, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of, even though they're silent, they do have the ability to grunt. So sometimes they might grunt if they're upset or angry or triggered. And then rabbits can bite, that is definitely an ability that they have. And it's very painful to be bitten by a rabbit because they've got just those huge chompers that just, their teeth are kind of filed down by a lot of roughage like hay and wood and bark. And so it's sharp. It will penetrate the skin for sure. But I think that's more on the rare side. If a rabbit bites you, it's either accidental, like maybe you were holding a treat in your hand and they, just went for it, or they really truly feel threatened. So you would have to really threaten them for that, and not so much in like a scary sense, not so much in some predatory sense. A rabbit probably isn't going to go and bite a dog, right? But what they will bite and try to kill is another rabbit.
So you've got to be very careful about introducing a second rabbit.
Yes, I would say so.
And rabbits seem incredibly sensitive to their environment. What is a healthy rabbit environment, particularly within a home that you mentioned, bunny-proofing them? What does it look like?
What does a bunny-proofed room look like? It's really not that complex. There's, people I think become overwhelmed or intimidated by the idea of having to bunny-proof, and that's why they think it's easier to do a cage or an X-pen. It's really just, I think there's a lot of observance involved in what your rabbit is actually interested in, because there are some rabbits who like don't care about chewing certain things, and then there's other rabbits that do, and like you just can't predict because every rabbit is different. I would say the main elements are protect your baseboards, the wood trim in your like on your wall, and protect electrical cords. That's the biggest. Electrical cords are huge. I think that's like a universal bunny thing. They just love electrical cords for some reason. And then everything else is subjective. It's like, okay, maybe they're digging at the couch, maybe use a couch protector. And, you got to see what they're actually doing. And then some of it is common sense too. Just like, don't leave your favorite Prada shoes on the floor for them to get a hold of, like put that away.
Your handbag.
Exactly. And also you'll find that as they get older too, they do become a little bit less destructive. I wouldn't say it goes away completely ever, because they like to chew. That's just who they are. It's in their nature. But, like the latter half of Lennon's life, I found that like she didn't care about shoes. She didn't care about the couch anymore. It was really when she was a baby that she was the most destructive. So yeah, it's not that hard to bunny proof, and it's relatively inexpensive.
Mm-hmm. And advice for people, especially, families, again, it's responsible pet ownership 101, but especially when they want to interact with their bunnies on the couch. How frequently do you find that there are incidents of like traumatic injuries because people forget that they may or need to get down, or they stood on, or they sat on, or like those kind of incidents?
I think it's more on the rare side, actually. Like if you're accidentally sitting on your rabbit, then I can't help you with that. I mean, that's just, you just weren't paying attention, or you forgot that you had a rabbit in the house. I mean, I always made sure I don't think that ever happened to me, but there's really no dangers with like having your rabbit on the couch or the bed, or they jump, they jump very high, so they can jump back down. No issues. I think the only risks involved, maybe with height, is just making sure that they have that traction to land on. So I always recommend little area rugs and things like that. If your house already is not carpeted, and a lot of houses aren't anymore, because a rabbit can slip, and that's kind of dangerous. And then if there is something that's like really risky, I would just block it off. I would just not give them access to, if there's something that could potentially be a risk. And then, yeah, I mean, I always made sure to watch where I was going or stepping, and definitely there were a couple of close calls with Lennon where I might have gone, oh my God, I didn't realize you were there. Thank God I didn't step on you. But thankfully it never happened. So
we've seen a couple of injuries with, self-closing doors, or doors closing in the wind or whatever. And of course, them not moving out the way. So the other thing we've seen obviously is them being dropped by young children, or not mishandled or not appropriately handled. I'd love to ask you, what is your advice on correct handling of rabbits? Because there are things about rabbits that maybe owners who haven't had rabbits before are not aware of.
Yeah, well, that ties back into not getting a rabbit for your small child, because a lot of those injuries do stem from that too. It's like a kid poking a stick into the rabbit's eye, or trying to lift them, or they don't know that maybe they're hurting a rabbit, and so I think to avoid all of that, just don't even get one for a small child to begin with. But if for some reason you do have one for your small child, I would only allow them to interact under supervision. I would not let any small child carry a rabbit. I just wouldn't, because I think that's totally unpredictable. It's not even so much like on the child too, and their inability to hold the rabbit. It's also the fact that the rabbits themselves can be unpredictable, and they might try to jump out or leap out or wiggle or scratch. Maybe they might scratch the child, and then that leads to something else. And so I just wouldn't even go there. Yeah.
So what is the correct way to pick up a rabbit?
Well, there's many, many ways, but I think the most universal, just kind of easy way is just always support the hindquarters and support the midsection, and just kind of like, do this and make sure that, and just hold them tightly, not by the scruff, not just like with one hand. I mean, later on, if you become like an expert, you can lift with one hand, but I think for beginners especially, always use both hands and hold them very, very tightly. And just that bottom half, make sure that bottom half is secure, because I think that's what makes them want to wiggle out, is when that bottom half is not secure.
Mm-hmm. And they want to kick out. I agree.
Yeah.
So rabbits, obviously, you've said, are incredibly intelligent animals, and I don't think people always appreciate how much mental stimulation they need. What does boredom or frustration look like in rabbits?
Well, I think that can be exhibited through distraction sometimes. If they don't have a lot of stimulation, they're going to target your belongings, your home, your furniture. A bored rabbit might just also retreat if, maybe it's a little bit of depression as well. But a lot of that can be taken care of through giving them the proper stimulation and hay. Like, I think people underestimate how important hay is, because not only is it there for nutritional value, but it gives them something to do. Like, hay is like, it's their job. It's like their 9 to 5. Like, they know, like, their goal during the day is to like chomp on hay and like find the good pieces of hay and, like kind of dig through their litter box, and rummage through their litter box. So I think you really just have to provide all of that: toys, hay, and, some people also opt for getting their rabbit a partner, and that takes away a lot of boredom. So I always recommend that too. If maybe you're not home a lot and you think your bunny could really benefit from that, then yeah.
So diet, as you mentioned, is another area where there's just so much misinformation online. Obviously, you made the comment that, they need to spend a lot of time eating, and that is also obviously so important for their gut. It occupies them for the day. If they are able to eat what they need for the day in 5 minutes, what else are they going to do for the rest of the day? Yeah. What are some of the things that are big no-nos in terms of diet, and how can new owners get it right?
Well, the diet is 80% hay. The rest is sort of a mixture of maybe pellets and treats and maybe some little miscellaneous things, vitamins and whatnot, if you wanted to do supplements. Oh, and veggies. Yeah. I don't know how I missed that, but they do like leafy greens for sure. But I think as long as you have the hay down, that's the most important thing. You want to make sure you're feeding, well, if it's an adult, that you're feeding them a grass-derived hay. If they're babies, then alfalfa-derived. And just make sure you're looking at ingredients the way that you would look at them for yourself. I think people get intimidated by that, but if you see like a lot of things that don't make sense to you, I mean, you can ask ChatGPT, like, oh, should I be like feeding molasses to my rabbit or, corn syrup, like that doesn't sound healthy, then, then don't do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of food can be homemade. It's really easy. Like you grind up some pellets or some hay, throw in a little banana, and you've like made a homemade treat, And so, yeah, there's a lot of fun ways to, keep your rabbit happy in that sense and keep it healthy. And I think just keep sugar to a minimum. Just don't overdo the sugar. I mean, treats are fine. Rabbits love treats. Don't deprive them, but just kind of know their limits. I think it's really easy, even with other pets and even our children. It's like you easily just want to like give them everything that they want and overfeed. It's very easy to overfeed. But I think if you can like know their limits and stay within those limits, then it's okay.
Definitely. I mean, I always smile because people often associate rabbits with carrots, when in reality it needs to be more like a treat than a staple. And obviously we see severe obesity in rabbits if they are allowed to eat a lot of sugary treats like we see with cats and dogs. But obviously you make the mention of hay, not only for the gut, but for their teeth, as you mentioned with their biting. That is so important in terms of their dentition. Sorry, I'm struggling. For them to be healthy, not only for, we want to reward good behavior, but it's got to be in moderation. So great that green leafy veg and things are great additions without that sort of adding to already a problem of potentially not getting enough exercise and stimulation. So what are some of the things that you will leave in your house when you're going to work, just to stimulate, that are not expensive toys? Because I think a lot of people use the thing, it's like, oh, toys are so expensive, and they don't really use them. Are there any sort of great little tips and tricks that you can leave the listeners with that they can utilize without major expense?
Yeah, rabbit toys are, the one thing I always liked about having a rabbit is that the enrichment in the toys are relatively simple. You can DIY a lot of toys. You can use like little cardboard tubes. You can give them cardboard boxes. Of course, you want to like monitor them first. You don't want to like experiment and just surprise them with something that you've never tried before, because some rabbits have really sensitive stomachs. And other rabbits, they could ingest the craziest things and be totally fine. So, I want to make that disclaimer, but they really like untreated wood, untreated seagrass, like seagrass mats. There's like a lot of, you could buy those at the store or online. They like, untreated basket weave, like wicker. They like, I always had fun kind of I would stuff like hay and maybe like some herb mixtures into like a little, paper towel tube. I would like cut it into shapes and stuff for Lennon. And I mean, if you do want to splurge, I find that like a lot of the toys, there's a lot of like small businesses online that, that make really, really unique things. And a lot of like, I think foraging mats are really fun. They can kind of forage for their pellets on that. And there's like ways that you can also play with your rabbit without any toys. You can like give them a towel or like an old cloth or t-shirt and do like a little tug of war with them. But they're also like, they get over it easily. Like rabbits, and I think they find a lot of fun in just being exploratory, like hopping around the house, sniffing new things, digging. They do like to dig. You could do like a digging box for them. You could put in a bunch of some people use actual soil,
Yeah.
And,
little herb gardens. I've seen this.
Yeah. But like they also just enjoy being petted all that stuff and groomed. And so that keeps them busy too, as long as they're getting like diva treatment. So
Now, I know we're running out of time, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to ask you. Obviously, taking on a new rabbit, for example, or one that you've taken as a rescue, you want to slowly introduce them to touch and interaction and things. How do you get them used to things like grooming and being touched and handled? What is some of the advice? Is it positive reinforcement with food? Is it just slowly every day? How do you get people to pursue that without just giving up and then never forming that kind of bond?
get down on their level. They're prey animals. So if you're going to interact with them, do it kind of on the ground. If you're doing it up, if you're hovering above them, that can be really intimidating. I would kind of get them in a more enclosed area, maybe start interacting with them inside of an X pen. And that way that, you know, they can't just like run away from you, right? And they're sort of forced to confront this like human interaction. Obviously, you don't want to do anything that like makes them uncomfortable, but I think that's kind of the best way to sort of speed up the process. And treats, like the way to a rabbit's heart is through their stomach. And so I think if you're kind of like able to learn to hand feed and, you know, maybe you take a bite out of a banana and you share that banana with them, that's a really beautiful way to connect and bond. And then honestly, just like time, it's just time. And time and repetition. And if you're kind of doing, if you're hanging out with your rabbit on a daily basis, a lot of the times it's like kind of natural. You don't even notice that you're bonding with them, you know? But it shouldn't take super long. I mean, it also depends on the rabbit's background. Are they a rescue? Did they come from trauma maybe? Or maybe they came from an owner that neglected them, or they didn't have a lot of interaction before. Or maybe you've raised this bunny since they were a baby and the connection is very quick and instant. So it just all kind of depends on their background. But I would say just like with any animal, you have to make the time. You have to put in the effort. I think a lot of people expect like instant gratification with rabbits, and typically it's anything but instant gratification. But once you are able to kind of bond on a deeper level, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, it's very rewarding.
So rewarding. And I mean, obviously the difficulty, I mean, all pet owners will say this, we just don't have them in our lives long enough. So this is also something I would like to ask you about. You know, you form this incredible bond and they age a lot faster than we do. And at some point they leave our lives. How do you advise owners to deal with the time when, in particular, sort of age is something that they've got to take into consideration, and welfare and well-being, to kind of deal with that, and you know, when is the right time, if ever, to replace them? Because I think a lot of rabbit owners really struggle with that, having formed such a close bond with one rabbit in particular.
Yeah, I mean, that is the unfortunate cycle of this life, right? Everybody dies. Including, you know, we die as well. And so, nothing lasts forever. And even more so with a pet, they live much shorter lives, and then even more so with a rabbit. I think people actually underestimate how long rabbits can live. Again, there's a lot of stereotypes that they live short lives, because they actually used to live short lives because they were... the care was not as evolved as it is now, you know, back in like the 50s and 60s. And, you know, people would just feed them carrots all day and, you know, keep them in a small cage, and then they would live 2 years. And, you know, the care just wasn't as advanced, and the medical care wasn't as advanced. But they do live like almost as long as like dogs. They can live like anywhere from 10 to 14 years. Some people will say 8 to 12. I mean, the range really depends on like who you're talking to, but yeah. So if you're going to get a rabbit, be prepared to have them for at least a decade. And that decade will fly by very quickly. It will just fly right before your eyes. One day you wake up and they're a senior rabbit and they've got arthritis and, you know, all these things, you know, they're not that baby bunny anymore. So, yeah, there's really no way to prepare for that. And, you know, I'm sure you have tons of experience with this being a vet, and I'm sure having pets of your own. It's awful to kind of go through that end of life with them. There's something beautiful and awful about it at the same time, right? Like there's beauty in knowing that you reached the end with them and you were able to care for them and give them everything that they needed till the end, and that you were able to watch that beautiful aging process. And then obviously it's the biggest heartbreak of your life, you know, and it's incredibly hard to recover from it. I certainly haven't. And that leads into a second conversation about grief, right? That's its own podcast of like what grief means to each person, you know, because everyone has their own definition and their own journey of that. But as far as, you know, when do you get another rabbit? I know you used the word replace. I can't replace Lennon. I think that there's never another bunny that could replace her. I know there's some other people who they'll get another pet like a week after their dog died or their cat or whatever, you know, and I mean, that's not me, but I know everybody kind of handles things differently. And I just think that, you know, sometimes you're never really ready to get another pet. And I guess the advice I would give to people is just honor your grief and respect your grief and go through the process. And I always say, it's a full circle moment. It brings you back to the beginning where you kind of go, okay, well, can I afford another pet? You know, can I go do those vet bills again? Am I going to be home to give another animal the attention and everything that they need? You know, kind of go off the checklist of, is getting a rabbit, you know, the right thing for me to do? And so it kind of takes you back to the beginning again. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the difficulty, and I mean, I use that word replace very intentionally because I think, you know, often people go, then it's not going to be the same experience. You know, I think that you hear it with people who are talking about having other children, like, well, what if, you know, if it's not, you know, it's not the same experience, or what if, you know, you start to doubt your abilities or your training or your environment and what you can offer. Like you said, you know, you come full circle and going, you know, can I do this again? Emotionally, physically, mentally, financially.
Exactly. Well, I think, yeah, I mean, you kind of, you start, the thing is, once you've learned everything that you learned the first time, because it becomes a learning experience, right? Yeah. And so you're kind of operating on more of, or at least I am, I can't speak for everybody, but once you go through something once, the second time around, you operate more from, you know, what are the known quantities in this equation? And, you know, I look back on when I got Lennon, and I got her impulsively without having any knowledge, without having any money, you know, and then now you go, okay, like, can I afford this? Do I have time for this? Would I be emotionally available for them? You know, all those things. It comes with maturity, with experience, with age. And that's the way that I operate from now. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very relatable. I totally agree. And I think relatable to cat and dog owners too. I think anybody who connects on that kind of level and loves their pets, it's an absolutely traumatic time, and you need the support and time and whatever time period that is to work through it. But thank you very much for being so vulnerable and having a discussion about this. It's been really informative, and I know it's taken us a bit of time to get together, but it's been a really special conversation. Thank you very much. And I know obviously the content you're putting out there, my listeners will add all the links so that they can go and have a look at the beautiful content that you've put out and the advice and support that you give rabbit owners. So thank you very much for all that you do.
No, thank you for having me as well. And yes, I know it's been, we've been trying to connect for a while, and I appreciate you guys being flexible. And yeah, it's been a true privilege to be on your podcast. So thank you.
No, thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode on the Pause and Effect podcast. If you found the discussion helpful, please like, share, and follow our podcast. Don't forget to leave us a comment or review. We love hearing from our listeners. Remember, you can listen to us on your preferred podcast platform. Welcome back to Just for Pets. You're with Dr. Cara.
Hi, Doc. It's Jackson the Jack Rossi here, and boy, am I itchy.
Are you on a hypoallergenic diet?
Hyper what now?
Changing to a special diet will really help. And Just for Pets have a massive range. And flea and tick medication, special shampoo.
Ooh, how quick can I get some?
Order today and we'll deliver pronto.
I feel better already.
Justforpets.co.za. Vet approved, pet adored. Get it all to your door.